Well, I think people write for different reasons, and I am one of those people who write for other people to learn from it. I think it is very important. Um, One of the images in Tamisha's adventure is the Sankofa bird, and you would know the Sankofa bird. So the bird that looks back over its shoulder, and it's the whole concept of you know where you have come from so that you could move forward. And if you don't know the struggle and you don't know where you have come from, how are you going to know where you are going? You need to know the struggle. You need to know your history. You need to. It gives you a sense of self-worth.
I was writing a piece about Toni Morrison the other day, and I think Toni Morrison did say that we should pay attention to the ordinary, because there are a lot of things happening around us that we can pay attention to, instead of maybe thinking that I need to travel to understand what life is. But you are alive. Life is happening also where you are.
You need a very good foundation. So you need to know your grammar. You need to be widely read. And my dad used to tell us to always have an inquiring mind. And by that, he meant always want to find out more, always be learning, always, keep the cogs in your brain going around, learn new things. Zoanne Evans. I live in Barbados, and I've been teaching for over 30 years, 16 years in the secondary schools, the local secondary schools, and 19 years at tertiary level at the University of the West Indies, Cape Hill campus. And my first teaching assignment was actually in Paris, in France. That's the first place I ever taught.
All right. So anyway, before we move into what you do today, which is your teaching, and of course, we're also going to talk about your books because you write. Tell me a bit about what you remember of yourself growing up in Barbados. I don't know if that is where you were born or did you move to Barbados. But anyway, tell me, what do you remember of you growing up as a child?
So I remember, I was born in Barbados, and as a child, I particularly liked the summer holidays because I knew all four of my grandparents, and my maternal grandparents lived 2 houses away, and my paternal grandparents live not so far away, still in the parish of Christchurch, where I was born. And so we would split the summers between the 2 houses, the 2 sets of grandparents. And so those are extremely nice memories because I think grandparents are very important, and I like the fact that I knew mine, and there was a lot of space to play with where my maternal grandparents lived. And at Easter time, we would fly kites. My brother used to make kites, and we would fly kites at Easter time. And on Saturdays, we would play with our friends in the neighborhood. And when we were at my paternal grandparents, we were there with a cousin, an older cousin, and we would play games that you don't really see now anymore, like a game called Chinese Skip. So we would play Chinese Skip, and we would play rounders, and there would be clapping games, and things that you don't see now on the playgrounds in Barbados.
All right. So yeah, we don't see those things anymore. But I'm sort of curious now because you see both your 4 grandparents, right? You say, correct?
Yes.
All right. Tell me, what do you remember of them particularly? Because like I told you, we're about storytelling here. We are interested in that story. So tell me what you remember about them.
Let me see. So my maternal grandparents were shopkeepers by profession. And I remember when I was very small, the shop closed when I was about maybe 3 years old, but I still have a vivid memory of being tiny and like my mother going to visit them. And I was tiny and they just passed me over the shop counter, lifted me up and passed me over the shop counter. I remember that. I remember my grandfather telling me about his owning a horse and buggy. And at that time, he was born in 1909. So there was actually a train in Barbados that stopped running in the 1930s. And he told me this story that he raced his buggy with the train. He just whipped the horse and raced his buggy with the train. I don't know who won, but it would have been a very fast train. And yeah, so, and then my grandmother made the best fish cakes. I have never tasted fish cakes like hers before or since. And she unfortunately didn't pass on the recipe to me, but I tried my hand at it, but her fish cakes were absolutely delicious. And then with my paternal grandparents, my paternal grandfather was a carpenter, and my paternal grandmother, she was a housewife. And I remember that my grandfather, he made a cricket bat for us. And one of the indigenous sports in Barbados is road tennis, and he made rackets for us to play road tennis at home. And he's the one who would send the kite frames, because the kites they had wooden frames. So my granddad would cut the sticks out, and he would send them down by my father for my brother. And then we would walk to the shop and buy kite paper to paste the kites. And they had various designs. There was like the star diamond and the capella, which we call capella. That was the Bajan vernacular, and box kites and so on. And then my granny, what I remember about her was tea time, because like we would play all day, and we would have lunch. She was into the knife and using the knife and fork. So I find that I still do that. Somebody commented on it on Facebook on a picture that I put up. And then in evening time, she would set the table with the tea things, and we would have like jello and cookies and sandwiches, and we would have to have a bath first, and then we would go to table and have our tea. And she was a tiny lady. My granny was probably, if she was 5 feet tall, she was tall. I remember at 8 years old, I was taller than she was. And she was a tiny lady, but she had 9 children, actually 10, but 9 survived. She had 7 boys and 2 girls. And my maternal grandmother, she had 5 girls. One of her children died, and that was a boy. And yeah, so I remember them fondly. I am thankful that I knew them. And maybe I will probably write about them one. The childhood aspect, spending time with them was very precious. And they both had dogs. I just remembered that. My mom called Rex. He was there from the time I was a baby till he died when I was about, I don't know, about 9. But I came along and found him. And my paternal grandparents, they had Spot and Blackie, 2 dogs, Spot and Blackie. So all of those that's the fabric of my childhood with where my grandparents are concerned. And I forgot to say that in the evenings after we had tea, we didn't go to sleep. We would walk through the neighborhood. We would walk to the neighborhood shop, and we would visit our great aunts, which were my grandmother's sisters, and they were Ursula. I'm forgetting the other auntie's name. Bertha, our Aunt Ursi. We call them Aunt Ursi and Aunt Bert. And they would have sugar apples and star apples, and they would spoil us with sugar apples that we would take back to Granny's house and we would eat. And they were very tiny too. On my grandmother's side, my paternal grandmother's side, the people are very short, but her husband was quite tall. Yeah. So yeah, that's what I remember.
That's very interesting. That's very interesting. Very valuable.
Yeah.
Now, let me also probe you a little bit there. Did you ever ask maybe your grandparents to tell you about their own grandparents? Did they tell you something about their own when they were young? Maybe something that they learned also from their parents and their grandparents?
Mm. Yeah, dad's side, my paternal grandmother, her dad helped build the Panama Canal. But he never came back. And it's not because he died. He was actually married to her mother, but he abandoned his family, and from Panama he went to the United States and he started another family, and they found out that he was already married, and they wrote home to Barbados to apologize and to make peace. But Aunt Bertha, I guess she was hurting too badly, but she would have nothing to do with them. And so I know that part of my paternal grandmother. And my paternal grandfather, there were 8 of them. There were 2 boys and 6 girls, and they all migrated to the United States with the exception of my grandfather, because what happened was, and they immigrated in 1924. And what happened is that he had hurt his foot, so he was not able to travel. And 1924 was also the year that Franklin Delano Roosevelt, I'm told, issued a law in the United States that forbade any more Black people entering. So my grandfather, my paternal grandfather, he was never able to join his brothers and sisters. And I think that affected him deeply. Yeah. So I know that about those 2. And then my maternal grandparents, my grandmother was raised by her grandmother, whose name was Dorothy. And she was a very, very strict woman. In today's age, she would have been classified as abusive, because she wanted her granddaughter to go to church 3 times a day. And if she didn't want to go, she would tie her to the bed and beat her. Now that would be counted as abuse. But my grandmother, for some reason, didn't see it that way. She actually loved that woman. And I found that a bit strange. She never had anything ill to say of her. And yeah, so I knew her mother. I knew my great grandmother. Her name was Eunice. We called her Eunice, but we called her Nice. And she was, she was a tiny woman as well. But my grandmother was not that tiny. And my grandfather, he was actually the son of a white planter. And that's not a nice story either, because in those days, it was black and white, and it was not a happy time in Barbados. There was a lot of racism and classism as well. So his father, which would have been my great grandfather, they called him Shilling, because they said he would breed Black men and then give them after they got children, and then he would basically have nothing to do with them. And my grandfather, he didn't speak much of that. He didn't speak ill of his dad at all, actually. But what little I do know, is that he would have to, when he had to go to school, because at that time education in Barbados was not free, he would go to the plantation yard and ask for money to go to school. And so he would see his white brothers. And I actually saw one of them when I was an adult. But there was no mixing of the family. because obviously we look Black and they look white. So that is the story of my grandparents.
Thank you so much for that. That is a good thing that you are able to recount those stories. They are important. They are really very important. Yeah, that is the essence of why we are here, because we are trying to create the connection. By the way, you didn't talk about your parents. Is there anything you want to say about that before we move into what you do today?
They were very big on education. My parents believed in education, and they did everything within their power to make sure that we were well educated. As children, we went to private schools. It sounds glamorous and grand, but the types of private schools we went to were, well, the first three were very simple in terms of like there were no school uniforms, and they weren't very big. I think the biggest must have had about, I said 20 children one time, but I don't think there were even 20 children then. There were about maybe 12 of us, 50. If there were 15, there were a lot. There were not a lot of us. And then the last primary school I went to, my brother was no longer with me because he had taken an exam here that we call common entrance, where you go on to secondary school. And that was a bit of a culture shock for me because it had a row of, I think, 200 children, and you wore school uniforms. So I was like, I was out of my element. I was accustomed to small schools around the dining table or out on the veranda. But the last school I went to, the last primary school, we did have classes in the veranda, but it was a different feel. But the headmistress of that school was extremely nice. She's 105 years old. She's still alive. And she's a beautiful person. She's an absolutely beautiful person. And if I don't think I would be where I am today if I hadn't gone to school there, because she took me to the next level in education. Because the school I was at before, my headmaster was an old man. He represented old Barbados. And so my handwriting is very cursive because I write with old time people because that's how he taught me. And I reverted to that. The children at the last school couldn't understand it, but once I became an adult, I reverted to the way I was taught originally. And but my last head teacher, she's an absolutely beautiful person. And she was recognized, and she was actually knighted. She's a dame. So her title is Dame Avis. Yes. I liked him too. I thank God for my teachers. I had extremely good teachers.
That is very good. Our teachers are they are our model. They are the one that showed us our way. Of course, after our parents, we had people that sort of molded us. Those are our teachers. Of course, it's the co-parenting at the end of the day. All right. Of course, you are a teacher today. You are a lecturer. Tell me that journey. That is important. How did you become a lecturer? I mean, how did you choose that trajectory?
My title is instructor. When I came back from France, I remember like, now what do I do? And my mother told me just to apply to every school that there is that I could. So I sent out all these letters and I applied to schools and I got a job. And she had always said I was going to be a teacher. The truth is, I didn't know what I wanted to be. I wanted to be a writer and to travel. But when I say I don't know what I wanted to be, that wasn't counted as being a profession. And it still really isn't in the Caribbean to a large extent. Things are changing, but to make a living off of writing at that time, it was something that my father was very much against because nobody was doing that. Nobody living in Barbados was doing that successfully. So anyhow, my mother had always said I was going to be a teacher, and I love children. And that's the trajectory that I did go down. I actually sought pastoral help for that. I got counseling because I struggled with it. And I remember the pastor at the time, he told me, he helped me to understand that that was my calling. I love children. I started a children's charity. And then, so I stayed in that for 16 years at the secondary level. And I really poured my heart and soul into it. And then I remember telling God that I was tired. Things had changed. The parents were very difficult. The children were difficult, but when I met the parents, I understood why the children were difficult. And normally I could handle it, but I found that I was no longer handling it well. And also I felt as though intellectually I needed a greater challenge. And I wasn't getting that teaching at secondary level. So I was just going through the motions. And I remember praying about it and telling only my very close friends that I wanted to move on. And one of them called me in the evening, and I asked God to help me, because I really felt as though I was supposed to move on, but I didn't know where I was supposed to move to. And one evening, a friend called me, and she said that there were some vacancies at the university. And she said, and if anybody can get this job, you can. And the funny thing is, she has no recollection of that phone call. I find it amazing. But I applied, but I was so fearful, even though I had asked God to move me on, that I waited so late that I couldn't post in the application. I had to take it in physically and drop it off. And then when the interview came, I had hurt my foot in a door. I had pulled back a door in a public office, and it had ripped the skin off of my toe. So I went to this interview dressed in a nice suit, but my foot could not fit in the shoe. So I limped into the interview, all apologetic, but I really enjoyed that interview. And then I didn't hear anything back from them. So I figured, well, I called my friend and I said, you know, I didn't get the job. I said, I heard nothing back. And she said, but that doesn't make sense. But then one day I just got a phone call, and it was in August. And when they called us in, it was 12 of us who were hired at the time, and they were very apologetic. They said they were late with getting back to us. And that began my journey at Cave Hill. And I have to say, I really enjoy my students. I love teaching. I really love teaching. I love working with young people. Some of my students aren't so young at Cave Hill, but I love working with them. I just like teaching. And I enjoyed my 16 years teaching. I taught at 5 different public schools. And I met a lot of children, and we did a lot of exciting things. The last school I taught at in secondary, I had started a school newspaper. Unfortunately, it didn't last after I left. And we would go on tours. We would go on a number of tours, and I even organized one day because I wanted them to enjoy learning. I think learning should be fun. So I remember one day I did it was like what would you call that? Where you put everything around the school, and they have to find the clues and look for them, and it was based on. I tried to link it back into their what they were doing, what they were studying. So a treasure hunt. So I hid the things all over the school, and I gave them clues, and then they had to come back to the classroom and they had to write about their findings and so on. So I tried to make it fun, and then I took them to Tyrrell Cot at one point, and they enjoyed that outing. I took another set to the Wildlife Reserve. I took 2 sets of students at 2 different schools, from 2 different schools to the Wildlife Reserve. And then I sent a set to learn to sail through my kids' charity. I sent 2 children from the last school I was at, and then some children who were not affiliated with that school. It was 5 of them in all. They went to learn to sail at the yacht club, and they enjoyed that. They got their certificates. I have pictures of them with their certificates. So yeah, children make my world go round. Yeah.
And that is really beautiful. That is so beautiful. All right. So you'll be teaching for over 16 years, you say, right?
That's in the secondary
In the
school
secondary
level, and
school.
then 19 years at Cave Hill. So that ages me. I'm not that young.
It's
Yeah.
okay, but that is also a good thing, you know. You're still
Yeah.
here, meaning you are enjoying it. You are enjoying the moment, right?
Yes, I love teaching.
That's beautiful. All right. So, at the university, what are you teaching?
So I teach creative writing and I teach business writing. Prior to that, I taught business writing and academic writing, but I always really wanted to teach the creative writing. And then when the pandemic struck, the opportunity arose, and I was so happy that I could teach creative writing. I really enjoy it. It's creative nonfiction, and I teach the foundation courses. So those are the courses that you have to take in order to get your degree. And yeah.
And what is creative writing? What does that mean?
So you write about, so in my particular course, you have assignments like a memoir, a reflective essay, a descriptive essay, and a narrative argument, and a narrative interview. So basically, you don't have to, as you do in business writing, follow a specific like with a proposal where you have a specific format that you have to follow, or literature review, which is more formal. With creative writing, you can include dialect. You write a story. It's a story that you're telling, but it's something that really happened. And they write some beautiful stories. So what I'm trying to do is get them together, get the stories together to get them published. And I have had some excellent stories coming out of those students. So yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right. Now, what are the basis that people need to understand to be able to come out with a good writing so that you can score them good, either as student, but of course, then they are going to enter into the world, they're then working and then doing writing. I mean, what are the bases that they need to understand?
I always tell my students, y'all need a good grammar book to begin with, because I find that grammar is not really taught anymore, not just in Barbados, but across the world. It seems to be an issue. So if you want to be a good writer, you have to know the basics. You have to know your parts of speech. You have to know how to spell for sure. You have to also be widely read, because and all sorts of books. And I always tell my students, read the classics, read the British classics, the African classics, the West Indian classics. Well, we wouldn't call them classics in the West Indies, but we have some excellent West Indian writers. And I tell them, I mean, the bookshop is there and the library is there on campus. But I mean, even if you're not on campus, you need a very good foundation. So you need to know your grammar. You need to be widely read. And my dad used to tell us to always have an inquiring mind. And by that, he meant always want to find out more, always be learning, always, keep the cogs in your brain going around, learn new things. So I think if you want to be a writer, you can't be insular. You have to look at the world around you and observe what's going on, and be interested in lots of different things.
That is really beautiful. I was writing a piece about Toni Morrison the other day, and I think Toni Morrison did say that we should pay attention to the ordinary, because there are a lot of things happening around us that we can pay attention to, instead of maybe thinking that I need to travel to understand what life is. But you are alive. Life is happening also where you are. Maybe all you need to do is to pay attention to that little conversation you had yesterday, to the person you greeted, to that food that you ate, that water that you were just drinking. There are a lot of information around there that you could put together, and you tell a story around it. Somebody will say, "Wow, I never thought of it that way." So
but even about my grandparents and stuff, people have very interesting lives. And I agree with you. The things that may seem mundane can actually make some very good topics. I had a student write a story about her backpack, but it was because she was traveling though. She had the opportunity to travel, and she was 40 years old, and she had a family. She had small children and a husband, and the opportunity arose for her to travel, and she went online and looked up the lightest way to travel because she didn't want to be lugging around with suitcases, and she put everything in a backpack and traveled across Europe in that with her friends who thought they had to take a lot of luggage. And she turned out being the fortunate one because she didn't have to be pulling luggage off the train. So sometimes it's the mundane things, but that one that it does involve travel. But I had another student write about her experience as a little girl going to school where her dad was the headmaster. And that was a brilliant story. It was very well written. And she spoke about being favored because they were the headmaster's children, whereas the other children were getting lashes. They never got lashes because they were the headmaster's children. And it made them unpopular. And she spoke of one teacher who did not take kindly to her. And the outcome of that, it's a very well written piece. Very well written piece. So, yeah. You don't have to write about going to the North Pole or anything like that. What's around you can make very beautiful stories.
Beautiful stories. I don't know if you could spend some time really talking about that. What really make a beautiful story? How do you pick? Because now you just said that was this piece that was written by your student, and you look at it and you say, yeah, that is a good story. What really make a good story? Could you share some information with us about that?
An interesting plot, and characters who make you want to know more about them, and a good twist in your story helps as well, and being very good at description. Stories where you feel as though you are there because the description is so vivid. All of that makes for a good story. So plot, character, a twist in it, very vivid description, and a way with words. But sometimes you don't even have to use words that are very, some people write very flowery kind of writing, and I think of Carl Seeley, the writer Carl Seeley, one of our late writers, Barbadian writers. He had a way with words, but not everybody has that gift to use words the way he did. And sometimes just keeping it simple can make for a beautiful story as well. So it's very dependent on how you develop your plot and your storyline and what you want us to focus on. And you have to feel the story too as a writer, because if you're not feeling it, we're not going to feel it. You have to make us want to read it.
Okay, now let's talk a bit about your writing, because you teaches people how to write creative writing, but you are a writer yourself. Tell me, what do you really like about writing? What do you write about often?
Well, my books are different. The very first one was a book of poetry, and that was born out of poems that I wrote when I was, they mainly came from when I was on campus. I went to campus from 1986 to 1989 as an undergrad, and I was pretty sad. I was pretty sad at that time, that period of my life, and I would write out of my pain and out of my sadness. And it's called The Song Within Me, and the name that I got that from a program I heard on a program I heard, Focus on the Family. There's a program called Focus on the Family, and it spoke of a woman who died with the music within her. She wanted to be an opera singer, but her mother insisted that she be something else. She loved a particular man, but her mother insisted that she marry somebody else. So it was like she was being forced to do all these things that she didn't want to do. And there were parts of my life like that, because I wanted to be a writer, but I couldn't be a writer. My dad, he wanted me to be a doctor or a lawyer. I wanted to be none of those things. At one point, I was even in a science forum because he thought it would be best if I did science, but I didn't want to be there. I wanted to be doing art and languages. Anyhow, when I went to campus, it was not a happy time. I enjoyed campus, but it was not a happy reason for me living on campus. I lived on campus, and I wrote out of my pain. So that first book was based on that experience. And then it was like, as time went on, things got brighter, and they didn't become perfect. It took a long time for my life to be as it is now, where I'm extremely happy, extremely happy and comfortable. But then my other book, my second book, was short stories and poems, and that collection was basically, I was writing about experiences based from my travels, from teaching, and from life itself. So that's reflected in the poems and the short stories. And then my other book, I did a coloring book, because I'm an artist as well. So I illustrated a coloring book, and got it published to raise money for my children's charity. And then my other book was my thesis, my doctoral thesis. And then the last one, which is Tamisha's Adventure, I actually prayed about that one because I didn't like what I was seeing in the schools. And that one I started in 2006 or somewhere around there, and I didn't finish it until COVID. I didn't like the behavior I was seeing in the schools. I didn't like the fact that the children's bags contained no books. Education is free in Barbados. And if you know anything about our history, you would know that our forefathers fought really hard for us to get a free education and to have an equal footing in society. Because of course we were colonial, we were ruled by England. Barbados back in the 1920s and 30s was very racist. It's as if we have forgotten the fight. So I wanted to write a book. I actually prayed about it. I told God to give me a book that is going to make a difference. Give me a book to write that's going to make a difference. So I don't know, what came to me was all these children who were not taking advantage of the free education. And I molded them into this character called Tamisha. So she's a composite of a lot of the children I met. She has the ability, but she doesn't see the importance or the value of education. So her sole ambition is to plait hair, and then when she leaves school to just, plait hair and do whatever she feels like. And if she has children and they don't want to go to school, she wouldn't send them to school. So that was the trajectory she was on. And in that story, she goes into the library after, I don't want to give away too much of the story, but she goes into the library after a speaker comes to the school and talks about women who, successful cosmetologists and hairdressers, and she goes into the library to research one of them, and she falls asleep and ends up in Barbados just after emancipation, and she meets an ex-slave girl who can neither read nor write. And this girl would love nothing more than to read nor write. And this girl gets pregnant by the overseer at the plantation, which is what happened a lot. Like my grandfather was the child of a planter. You know, the women had no say. The men, these white men would force themselves on the black women, and you know, yeah. So when Tamisha sees all of this happening, she starts to think, and she can't get back to the 21st century. So she's really frantic, and she's wondering what's going to happen to her. So she learns a valuable lesson. She learns that the education that she spurned was something to treasure. You know, it was not something to be thrown away. And I had the opportunity to go to schools, a couple of schools, including the last one I taught at, because that's where the story is actually based. So Linda Dean, I'm in a writers group, and Linda Dean is one of the members, and she's a lady who is big on children too, working with children. So she goes into the schools and works with the children. So she liked the book. It actually won the Frank Collymore, at the Frank Collymore Awards. It actually won the Prime Minister's Award at the Frank Collymore Awards. Linda won the Frank Collymore, came first that year. I won the Prime Minister's Award with that book. And I loved the fact that the children had a lot of questions for me. And she told me what their reactions were like when she started reading the book, and they were reading it with her in class. And then when they heard the name of the school call, and they were very quiet because they realized, wait a minute, we in this book, not them personally, but our school in this book. And I enjoyed teaching at that school, and I made some excellent friends there. And the children, in spite of everything, I love the children. And you know, they're a product of their homes. They're a product of their homes. So I find that parents don't really put an emphasis on education. Black parents don't see the value of education. A lot of Black parents on our island do not see it. They will tell the children, try and go to school and learn, but that's the extent of their involvement in their children's education. And for some reason, they're very involved, like when it's common entrance, some of them are involved, but then after that, everything falls away. It's like they don't care anymore. I can't say that for my life growing up. Like I said, my parents were very, very interested in our education. And I'm thankful for that. I'm very thankful for that. Education made a huge difference in my life. It opened a lot of doors for me. And I got to see the world. I got to write books. I got to meet interesting people, and I learned a lot.
Thank you so much for that. Now, tell me about the character, a bit more about it, because I can even see her. How do you frame that character? How did that image come to you? Now, you have imagined it, you have crafted it, and now it's alive. Mm-hmm. Tell me about the development of that character.
She is a composite of, I met feisty little girls like her in my years of teaching. I met little girls full of sass and, but when you really got to know some of them, home wasn't happy. And that sass was their survival mechanism. If they weren't sassy and didn't answer back and didn't fight, they would have been trodden. So, and that's the case of a lot of children on this island, and not just this island, I think in the world. A lot of children are being raised in homes that are not, not happy. And they have to learn how to survive. And so Tamisha, like I said, is a composite of the little girls that I met. And but the thing about Tamisha is that although she is not interested in school, she's smart. She's a smart girl. She's intelligent. And that's what I found. The children, it's not that they were dumb, but nobody told them how important education was. And nobody, furthermore, told them how important they were and how special they were. I think if they understood how special they were, their approach to life would be different. I really think so.
Now, let's take the argument to our demography, the African diaspora. That is where you are, that is where I am. How important is it?
It's dedicated to, the children of the diaspora. I dedicated it to the children of Barbados and the diaspora.
Absolutely. They need it. They need it. Now, tell me, how important is it for us to write our story? Okay, I'm asking you this question because it's at the center of what we are doing here, in that we are talking about story, talking about ourselves. You see, in the beginning, you talked about your parent. In fact, I intentionally asked you to tell me what your grandparent told you about their own grandparents, because as we are doing that now, we are now extending the line of connection, which I think to be really very important in knowing who we are, because we are really here. We really did have parents who gave birth to us while we are here. And those parents also had parents, and so on like that. So I'm trying to understand from your point of view, how important is it to write, to write down our experiences so that other people can learn from it?
Well, I think people write for different reasons. And I am one of those people who write for other people to learn from it. I think it is very important. One of the images in Tamisha's adventure is the Sankofa bird. And you would know of the Sankofa bird. So the bird that looks back over its shoulder, and it's the whole concept of, where you have come from so that you could move forward. And if you don't know the struggle and you don't know where you have come from, how are you going to know where you are going? You need to know the struggle. You need to know your history. It gives you a sense of self-worth. And my mother used to tell us a lot of stories about her dad. She particularly loved her dad. And like I told you, there were shopkeepers in it. So it taught me how hard they worked to get what they had. And then on my father's side, they were very much into education. So when I was much older, and my father was very much into family, because his was fractured. Like I said, when my grandfather was left here, it damaged him, and hurting people hurt people. He hurt his children, and that went down through the generations. And it helps to know your family history, because, well, I believe in God very much. I have a relationship with Christ, and I know that when you know your family history, it helps you to know how to pray for that family. And I think I might be going off topic. So tell me again what the question was.
The importance of putting down our experiences so that other people can learn from it. Yeah.
Right. So when you know your history and you come out of your like if you were in any pain or anything, or even if you were not in pain, and you put down your story. Like I know someone who her family know the matriarch back to right down to slavery, and she was she was born free, and out of her came a lot of great people in Barbados. They really made strides in economics, in dentistry, and all the different nursing and all the different fields. And they're able to tell their children about their ancestor. Now that will give them a sense of pride, of belonging, of knowing where they came from. And it is very important to write so that you help others. I mean, that is one of the great characteristics of storytelling and being a writer. Like when I read people like Jamaica Kincaid, she's one of my favorite writers. And when I read people like Maya Angelou and Langston Hughes, their stories inspire me. These were people of courage, and well, Jamaica Kincaid is still with us, but people of courage, and you know, they had a vision, and you want to experience life because of what they wrote. Like Maya Angelou traveled so much, and she was one of these protein characters. She did so much. It makes you, well, me, and I'm sure other women as well, it makes you want to go out and do stuff and use all the talents and gifts that you have and just be. And Langston Hughes, his poetry and his short stories, they inspire me to write. And even non-secular writers, writers who, like Joyce Meyer and so on, who write books that are religious in nature and so on. And Joyce Meyer has a story behind her of abuse and so on, and coming out of that darkness to light. Our writing is very, very important, and it can really help people to heal. It can help people to grow. It can help people to aspire to greatness.
Yeah. Now, tell me about that healing. That is important. How does writing help us to heal ourselves? Because now I'm looking at, you made mention of Maya Angelou, and of course many other people like her who have gone through also some tremendous stress, and who through their writing we could actually see their heart. You read a book by James Baldwin, for example, you could see what those men went through. James Baldwin at a point had to go to live in France instead of living in his own country where he was born. And of course, from France, and we will hear also what he was writing, what he was saying. So I am thinking that sometimes we need to go through experience, but after we have gone through experience, we need to explain what we have gone through. Because somehow other people are coming, because we are not the end of the road. We are in a line, but the line doesn't end with us. It didn't start with us. So I think as writer, as people who are able to tell story, we shouldn't even look at it as, because that is times to us. That is a privilege that we have to be able to help other people. Sometimes I look at it like we are candles. If you light the candle, it's not for you anymore. It is for other people. Because if it is for you, you wouldn't need to light it. So now you are writing, you are helping people. You are helping people to find their root, helping them to find their voice, helping them to say, okay, if he can do it, if she can do it, then I can do it too. Now, what is the risk of not writing or of not telling our story? Is that every time we'll appear as if we are the first one. We'll appear as if this is the first time. But it is not true. It's not the first time. It have happened to a lot of people before. But if you write it down, especially telling people how you overcame yours, now you help people not to suffer more, because now when they are undergoing the suffering, they understand that there is an exit. There is going to be an end to that suffering. That is not going to be like this forever. So that is where I might like you to share more light on the importance of this. Again, I am specifically talking about the African diaspora. The power that I think we have, those who are able to write. I just finished a 5-part book series, which I titled The Storytelling Mastery. And I'm really very passionate about that. I've learned a lot. And I believe other people can also learn from that. That is why I wrote the book. So yeah, share with me.
So yes, if we don't tell our story, how will those who come after? Because the Word of God says there's nothing new under the sun. So in terms of experiences, as the centuries go on, people experience similar things. And if you don't tell your story, you prevent somebody from flying, so to speak. I always speak of Joyce Meyer because she speaks so frankly about her story. She shares it with the world. And I've heard people say she says that over and over and over again. She's always talking about how her father abused her. And I told her, no, everybody does not tune into that station at the same time. When she repeats what happened, if you have just tuned in, you're hearing a woman who has found freedom. And she has written a lot of books, right? And with respect to the African diaspora, ours is a story of great pain and struggle, but also of great triumph. So when you read the stories of Maya Angelou, I am absolutely taken by her work, because the things that she went through and the things that she rose above, and her mother, what was her mother's name? Miss Baxter. And the way her mother like straddled life and took the bull by the horns, and it's like nobody didn't tell her she couldn't, so she just did. And Maya Angelou inherited that fighting spirit and that will to succeed and to, make a difference. And I don't think we're put down on this earth for ourselves. It's like, if you have a gift, and the Word of God talks about hiding the candle under a bushel, hiding your light. That's not fair. We go through things we're meant to share with people. And we're meant to share so that those who come after can not fight so hard. Even in terms of like what legacy you leave to your children financially. Sometimes I find as Black people, we don't know how to leave a legacy for our children, and we spend very badly. We have very bad financial practices. My mother was big on teaching us how to save and spend our money and not want everything, or I would see. And I mentioned that in Tamisha's adventure too, because I would see the children at the canteen, at the school, the various schools, and they're flashing the $50 and $100 bills. I usually took to school my lunch, but on the day I didn't, I had a $20 bill. They had $50 and $100 bills and expensive phones and expensive shoes and no books in the bags. And if you don't teach the generations that is not how you live, and I don't know if it is born out of slavery, out of poverty or what, but we weren't born with gold spoons in our mouths. My grandparents on both sides worked very hard. And when you don't teach your children the value of a dollar, when you don't teach your children the value of education, when you don't teach your children to respect their elders, and that was something that I found was very strong on my dad's side of the family, the respect for the elders. Because his family tended to be long livers. They would live up to 100. My great aunt lived to 103 or 104, and we had aunts and so on that lived in their high 90s. And my dad is 91 and he's still alive. And if you don't pass on to the generations the values that are important, so you follow the North American rap culture and the gangster culture, and you want to wear the gold, the bling as they call it, and you want to wear the expensive sneakers, and it's all about appearances and nothing inside your head. What's the good of that? What are you passing on to your children? So it is very important that we share. But the thing about books is that a lot of Black people don't like to read. So I would like to make it my mission to promote literacy, which is something we're doing in Barbados. There's a big thrust in and that now in Barbados. I didn't know that was going to be so when I wrote the book, but it is so. And I think also we have to show the value of families. I don't like the shacking up and having lots of children for different people, and the children are all mixed up and confused. And it does. You need to give your children a foothold in this world. Give them something where they can step up from the generation before. And we don't seem to get that as a people. Granted, there are those who don't like us because of the color of our skin and will try to pull us down. So we have that against us in the bigger countries. But don't let that be your excuse to not do well. Don't let that be your excuse to give up and to settle for mediocrity. When somebody tries to slap you down, step higher. There's a story of the man with the donkey. It's fictitious, I believe. And he had an old donkey he no longer had any uses for, so he threw it in a well. And then he got the neighbors to throw dirt down into the well to cover up the donkey. And the donkey was like, oh, woe is me, woe is me. And then it realized, wait a minute, I don't want to die. So when they would throw in the dirt, he would shake it off and step up. And they threw more dirt on him, he shook it off and stepped up. They threw more dirt, he shook it off and stepped up until it got to the top where he just stepped out of the well. And that is how we have to be. And we have to help those that are coming after us. We cannot be so bad-minded, as we would say in Bajan vernacular, that we don't want anybody to do as well as or better than us. That is just not on. That is just not on. You know, we have to leave a legacy as a people. I don't have children, but I have a children's charity. I don't have biological children. I have a children's charity. And I love children, and I will do everything in my power to make sure that I leave a legacy that, like children reading my book, and I would like my charity to live on after me, and children who come up through that charity, that they are able to excel because of the foundation I laid, and because somebody laid a foundation for me. Yes, mine was not perfect, but I don't know anybody whose is. But that's the thing. I had people, good people, godly men and women who helped me along the way. And that is what we need in the diaspora, to help each other, and we can't do it without God. I don't care what anybody says. And I know everybody doesn't believe in God, and everybody is not a Christian. So I'm not going to force my Christianity or my beliefs down anybody's throat. But I would say we have to help each other.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate that. I really do. Now, tell me something. What is the central message of your writing? Now, you look at everything that you are doing. And by the way, I want to say thank you for the good work that you are doing there, helping children. Even though you might not have your biological children, but you are helping children, those are still your children. You know, in Africa, we believe that any person who is old enough to be your mother is your mother. In fact, generally, you see a child that is, you know that this could be your child, is your child, because the children are for the community. You look at the child that is not doing well. If you see you can correct this child, you don't say, oh, it's not my biological child, I'm not going to do that. No, you have to do that, because if you don't do that, you are doing something wrong against the community, because the children belong to the community. So you are doing something good for the children, and that means that those are your children. And thank you so much for that work. Now, what is your central message of your writing? So if you could tell me something about that as we are moving towards the end.
I don't know, the message might change each time, but never really thought. So for Tamisha's adventure, the message is to take hold of those opportunities that are given to you, seize the day, and make something of yourself. The message of my first book, The Song Within Me, was that bad things can happen to you, but you don't have to stay back and stay down. God has a purpose for your life, and He wants you to live out that purpose. And I guess that might be the central message of my work, that each of us has a God-given purpose that we are meant to fulfill, a mandate that we're meant to carry out. And we do ourselves and society a disservice when we don't fulfill it. I guess that would be it. Yeah.
Powerful. That is powerful. It is said that when the gods send the blind man to the war, to the battle, you are supposed to win even as a blind man. Only that you need to win as a blind man do. Yes, we all need to find our mission. Why are we here? What are we supposed to do? If we are doing that, then we are happy humanity, because humanity, or the world, we are 8 billion people in the world, is still made up of individual. If we continue to eliminate one after the other, very soon there is no person on earth. But if every person is contributing to the reservoir of everybody, then very soon there is enough for everybody. So each of us counts. We are important, each and every one of us, irrespective of where you might be, what might be your profession, your career, your riches or poverty, your experiences or inexperience. We are all important. We all need to contribute the way we are. All right. How can people find you? Those who want to learn more about you?
Well, my Facebook page is not open, I guess. They could email me, zoegirl@gmail.com, ZOWIEGIRL@gmail.com. I'm also, my kids' charity is on Instagram, kids_in_action 1998. Yeah, so I don't go on Instagram all the time though, but I never thought about being found. So okay. I guess my email and Instagram.
All right, that's fine. Now, what would be your final thought here to conclude the conversation? We have talked a lot about education, about you, about storytelling, and about the African diaspora. How would you like to conclude it?
I would like to conclude it by encouraging any young person listening. It doesn't matter where you come from, what happened to you or didn't happen to you. I would like to conclude by saying, God has a purpose for your life. You're very special. You are one of a kind. There's none of us in this world has the same fingerprint. We're all uniquely different. And wherever you're at in life, if you're feeling downtrodden, do not give up. And I would like to encourage, I speak as a Christian here. I would like to encourage our young people not to look for the answers in Hollywood and in drugs and in the profanities that are in the songs that are out there, the lyrics. It may sound very boring when I say to look for the answer in Christ, but my life is extremely interesting and exciting, and it's very peaceful. And I found that peace in Christ. I found fulfillment. There were a lot of things I didn't think I would get because of how difficult life was along the way. But like I said, I met good people, godly people. So be careful who you choose as your friends. Choose your friends carefully. So this message is for the young people. Choose your friends carefully. And if you don't know who to choose, ask God to choose them for you. I ask God to choose my friends for me. And make something of yourself. Dream big. Dream big. Don't give up on your dreams. And with God on your side, he will take you places. I can tell you that for sure. I speak from experience.
Thank you so much, sister. I really appreciate you and I appreciate your contribution here. We value what you have said here. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.